Welcome to News Now. Tonight, we take a deep dive into the president's impeachment hearing. A former FBI agent is in studio today to talk about funny money and child labor abuses at fast food establishments. But first, the state of Michigan. How did Governor Gretchen Whitmer do in her first year as Michigan's governor? Republican State Senator Jim Runstead of the 15th District joins us on the phone now from Lansing. Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely, Kevin. Glad to be on.
The job the governor had here was to fix those darn roads. 1 year in, where are we at?
Well, the legislature put in another $400 million in the budget for the roads. It would be an absolute record amount of money put towards the roads here in Michigan, and unfortunately, the governor vetoed the $400 million and basically refused to cooperate with the putting together of the budget by the legislature because she demanded a 45-cent a gallon increase on gas. That was polling at about 75% opposed around the nation. And yet she was not going to give up on that. She kept banging that drum all over the state and literally refused to allow department heads to cooperate with the legislature in crafting the budget. So we tried to get more money into the roads, but unfortunately the governor did veto that.
Yeah, the gas tax is dead. What about the idea of toll roads? A lot of people are throwing that around today.
Well, there's, states that really do very well with toll roads. The problem with Michigan is that we are a peninsula, so it's something that they'd have to detour to come up into Michigan and not traveling through to other destinations. So there's going to be a study done on that to see what its feasibility is. So I guess we'll have to wait to look at the study after it's done and see if that's a feasible option or not.
A lot of people are talking about the new revenue from legalized marijuana, recreational marijuana. Will there be enough tax revenue coming in from the sale of marijuana to fix the roads?
No, there won't be a fraction of enough to meet the roads on the marijuana taxes. And what there is, my preference would be to use for our massive epidemic of opioid addiction here in the state of Michigan. People are dying of overdoses at record rates, suicides associated with these addictions, and there's practically nothing in terms of treatment. People are waiting and waiting for treatment. I'd love to see those taxes used to mitigate this epidemic here in the state of Michigan.
Different experts throw around different numbers about what it would take to actually fix Michigan's roads. Do we have enough money now, or do we have to get an increase somewhere?
Well, there was a recent study done, a poll by the media that said that the majority, I think it was somewhere between 60 to 70% of the people of Michigan felt that Michigan has within its budget the ability to fund the roads, and I happen to agree with the majority of the citizens. We went through the budget, and I saw a number of things that I am pleased were taken out, and I think there's more cuts that could be made to the budget in order to find additional dollars for the roads.
You know, you talk about the budget. It was quite a mess. It got done pretty late, and there was a lot of really non-negotiation about the budget. The governor had an idea, and the Republicans had another idea. How did that get to that point where it got just so divisive?
Well, the governor said she wanted the 45-cent tax increase, and the legislature was not biting on that. So she said this is, a line in the sand. So as the legislature was working on the budget for months and months, she told all the department heads of all the departments in Michigan, do not cooperate with the legislature on putting budgets together. At that point, you're groping in the darkness trying to put a budget together, and you have no cooperation from the other side. There's no dispute on this. That is what happened. So the legislature had to put together the best budget that we could put together without any cooperation from department heads in state government.
One of the issues we heard referring to education was this controversy over holding back third graders. Now, the idea is that if you're not up to a proper reading level, then you're supposed to be held back. Now there's talk of getting around that. What is the status of that?
Well, you're absolutely correct. And the concern was that there was many districts that said, hey, let's not worry whether the children can read. Let's just pass them out through. And literally thousands upon thousands of students were graduating who couldn't read their degrees. They were absolutely illiterate. And so it was, feel good to receive a degree that was absolutely worthless. And these children were not really employable in a modern economy because you have to be literate. So there was a concern with the legislature, let's try to intervene and intercede by the third grade, because studies show if a child can't read by third grade, they're basically behind the eight ball all the way through the rest of their life. So we said they have to read by third grade at a certain level or they would be held back. That is being looked at as possibly being modified. I would like to have, like Texas, that every child is tested so we find out very early what kind of learning disabilities they may have. If you have an unidentified learning disability, you simply are not going to learn to read. And yet, if you're identified and the intervention is proper with the modern technologies we have in teaching reading, you can overcome that. So that's something I really would like to focus on.
It's been all over the news for the past couple of weeks, but workplace harassment. What is your take? Does more need to be done up in Lansing on this issue?
Well, I'm really pleased that the legislature has a very rigorous sexual harassment training program. Every staff member, every legislator has to go through and sign off that they have went through this intensive sexual harassment training. Also, if anyone here in the legislature makes an allegation, that allegation is taken seriously. There's mandated reporting. It goes over to the business office, which is bipartisan and does a thorough investigation, and that's going on right now.
And you believe that the investigation with Pete Lucido will be thorough and will be handled properly?
Absolutely. The attorney that is being utilized is an attorney that was chosen by leadership of both the Senate Democrats and Republicans. So it's going to be a very, very thorough investigation.
All right. Thank you very much for keeping an eye on things on such a big day up in Lansing. I hope you'll join us again real soon. Thanks for being on News Now.
Absolutely, Kevin. Anytime. Thank you.
We'll be right back with more News Now with retired FBI agent John Anthony. Fast food restaurant Chipotle was slammed with a $1.3 million fine after investigators found 13,000 labor violations in over 50 stores in the state of Massachusetts. Joining us now to talk about this is retired FBI agent John Anthony. John, thanks for being here.
You're welcome.
Wow, that's a big problem and a big number.
Well, it is a big problem, and it's what the restaurants are doing. They're preying on the young. They don't have the knowledge about the work rules or the hours they have to work or whatnot. The overtime pay was a big question here with Chipotle, and it's not so much that the age of the employees were the victim. It was the hours that they were working, and they just didn't understand how they needed to not work those kids those hours. The problem was then the kids suffered for deprivation of sleep. They couldn't get their homework done in school. It just cascaded downward, and the fine, I think, represents the seriousness of the offense.
I think there's a responsibility, right, of the employer to protect the kids. Yeah. I don't know if that is like to the letter of the law, every little thing is written out, or if it's more common sense. Hey, these are kids, you need to protect them.
Well, it's both. Certainly the law is written to protect not only the kids but also adult employees with regard to overtime that they can be worked, and then the compensation for that overtime. In this case, it was a failure in both. I'm convinced that Chipotle knew exactly what they were doing. They had some good employees, I suspect. They wanted to keep them, and by working them longer, they were assured that they would have a good quality service to their customers.
One of the problems that jumped out at me is they have teenagers under the age of 18, and they're working after midnight. You talked a little bit about school, and obviously that could really hurt your ability to study and be fresh the next day when you come in. But you were in law enforcement all your life. It also creates a danger of the possibility of being robbed, doesn't it?
Well, that the security issue is always a problem, and at night and certainly after midnight, people that are out on the street after midnight and going into these places do have a propensity to rob them. Not only that, but when the kid would leave the store, he's also vulnerable to being assaulted and robbed. So it's a two-way sword that they would have to face if they're working those late hours, which they shouldn't be. During the daytime, get them home, get them in bed, get them studying get them working late at night after midnight is not a way to go.
And working over 48 hours a week, I mean, that's a ton for a student. That's a ton for anybody, really.
It's just too much of a pressure to put on the kids, and they needed to be punished. And I think the reason the fine was so high was to send a message to all businesses out there that if you're going to pull this stuff, you're going to suffer financially, and that's where you can hurt them by hitting them in the pocketbook.
They were saying that they were also hiring kids without work permits. Why is that important?
Well, the work permit ensures that you're getting the person that you say you're hiring, you're getting the correct age, you're getting a correct address and some background information. As an employee, an employer, you want to make sure you're getting the best qualified people. And those people have applied that have the card that are going through the process to ensure that they're qualified to work in these restaurants or any business for a short period of time.
Another interesting part of this was the sick time violation. So apparently people would call in sick or say they were sick, and they were told, sorry, that doesn't qualify. That whatever illness isn't going to fly. And it appears, based on the fines and what we're seeing, is that they should have.
Oh, absolutely. The onus is on the employer to make sure that the business is run properly and that the employees are treated properly and that there's no problem with either health or sickness in regard to their employment status.
It's in the fast food industry or the food industry in general, you definitely don't want sick employees. That creates all kinds of other problems.
Yeah. And the longer hours the under 18 would work, the more propensity there is for a problem with the food distribution there. So you're right, you don't want to compromise the integrity of the product.
So what do you think is happening at restaurants across the country today?
Well, I think they're concerned. They're more concerned than they ever have been. If you walk into a restaurant late at night or in the afternoon and you see a teenager working there, I think you'd want to be a little more cautious about going into that particular business. But certainly this particular fine, being the significance that it is, has sent a message to the restaurant business. I think you'll see a cleaning up of their act, let's put it that way.
I wanted to talk to you about this other case that I saw out of Minnesota. This is a counterfeit bill case. $900,000 worth of counterfeit money. But what was most interesting is all of the counterfeit money was $1 bills. Have you ever seen anything like that?
No, but keep in mind that the current U.S. currency today has that stripe in the $20 bill. They have that stripe in there which you can check and make sure it's not counterfeit. The $1 bills don't have that. But you're going through a lot of effort to produce a counterfeit bill, and it's a $1 bill. But the amount of money that they seize would make up for it, so they can pass those off rather quickly without being detected.
Yeah, the most popular counterfeit bill is the $100 bill, and that would give you basically $100 worth of profit if you're able to pass it.
Yeah.
If you're able to pass the $1 bill, it's $1 worth of profit. Yeah. What makes you think that this was a good idea or something that they even wanted to do?
Well, I think in my opinion, it is probably related to the drug business. If you got a $5 or $10 worth of narcotics, which is a common purchase of heroin or cocaine, $1 bills will work perfect. You don't need a $100 bill. In fact, that $100 bill wouldn't work on the street. So the $1 bill would work in connection with a drug purchase. But there's a lot of work that goes into making that $1 bill for the return that you're going to get. That's why you see such a large quantity being confiscated. If you were working with a higher denomination bill, it wouldn't be nearly as big.
Yeah, we saw the boxes of bills that came in. They came from China. Is China a hotspot for this?
China's a hotspot for anything illegal. There's no doubt about it. I mean, they have people over there working 24/7 to see how they can defraud the United States and the currency in other areas.
And they counterfeit all kinds of things, shoes and purses and watches and everything. How does that impact the economy real quickly?
Well, the economy suffers dramatically because, first of all, the product that's being counterfeited is not the same quality as the one you would buy in a store here. I remember a friend of mine bought a brand new Callaway golf club, thinking it was legit and it was counterfeit, and he could tell right away as soon as he swung it that it was not the same product. So the customer is defeated. The company that's their legitimate manufacturer, they're shortchanged. So it's a cascading down the chain of the economy. Everybody suffers except the person in China that's making them.
All right, John Anthony, thanks for being with us. I hope you'll come back.
I will do. Thank Kevin for your time.
All right, we'll be right back with more News Now. Throughout the impeachment trial, senators have dozed off, eaten snacks, passed notes to each other, and scoffed at things they disapproved of. But there's also been some revelations not previously known. But will it lead to only more headlines or an actual conviction of the president? Joining us now is lawyer and political strategy analyst Roshini Rajkumar. Roshini, thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Lots of interesting things to talk about, Kevin.
Yeah, I tell you, this thing started out really slow, pretty boring. Nobody seemed very interested. And now it's kind of heated up now that this John Bolton book is coming out, and the information that he claims that there was quid pro quo. What do you make of that, and how will that change the game?
Well, I always find timing very interesting when parts of books are leaked, especially ahead of very important proceedings in a court of law, or in this case, in the Senate for the impeachment trial. Timing, beyond convenient for something like this. But I also have mixed feelings as someone who, respects the law and also respects that role someone plays as a confidant and advisor to people in high places, such as a president. So to do a book like this, in the case of John Bolton, it's interesting that he even went ahead with that project. But as far as witnesses and all of that argument that some senators want, the House really had its opportunity as it was doing its proceedings. And what it sent to the Senate, in my opinion, constitutionally, is really all the Senate has and should have.
You look at John Bolton, he's got his legacy to think of through all this. If you were coaching him, would you have him play this straight, or would you have him go on a big press tour? How would you advise John Bolton?
Well, to be ethical, John Bolton should wait for this trial to end and see what the vote is with the senators. It should only be a few more days, and then there's going to be a vote. And, all signs are pointing to the fact that President Trump not being removed, but, things could change. We've seen a lot of surprises in the last few years. But my recommendation definitely, if I were coaching John Bolton, would be wait and see what happens with the trial. But of course, that doesn't always sell books, Kevin.
For sure. A lot of Republicans thought that this would just be a quick acquittal, but now it looks like they don't have the votes to block witnesses, and that this is probably going to drag out a little longer than people thought. Do you think that's going to make things uncomfortable for the president?
Oh, it's definitely going to be making things very uncomfortable. But, we've seen from President Donald Trump that very little truly ruins his game plan, right? He rolls with the punches, sometimes very smoothly and sometimes very disastrously. So I don't know that anything the Senate could do either side of the aisle that's going to really take him off his game.
Executive privilege has been used over and over again by many presidents. Polls that have been coming out seem to indicate that a little more than 50% are against the president using executive privilege in this. But do you think it's almost certain that he will?
Well, knowing him and what we've seen as far as knowing him, probably. I wouldn't be surprised if he used it. But at the end of the day, the bigger picture here is we've got an election in 9 months. And both parties aren't really keeping that front and center. There is a real good reason for both of them, from the optics standpoint, from a strategy standpoint, from a winning standpoint, in November, to get through this trial, do the vote, it goes whichever way it's going to go, and then move on. There's a really strong argument for that. And I'm not seeing a lot of people waving that flag.
Yeah, you have the Republican candidate, President Donald Trump, on trial right now, and you have several senators who are running for Democratic to be the Democratic presidential nominee. They're conducting the trial. It's crazy optics to see this happening, and it seems like what's going on now is going to have a real lasting impact going forward.
Yeah, it will have a lasting impact. And those senators who are running for president, running for the job Donald Trump now has, others have asked me, is that a conflict of interest for them to be in that trial, to be a vote? It's not a conflict of interest because their first job is as senator of the United States. And that is the role they should play. Those are the duties they should remember day in and day out, because that's the record they will be judged on. The election may go on, they may drop, they may not get the votes in the primaries and the caucuses, but they have to do their job right now, which is as a U.S. senator in the case of a few of them.
And some worry that this just lowers the bar for impeachment, that maybe every president that comes along will get impeached if the opposing party has enough votes in the House to do it.
It is definitely concerning, Kevin, because we have to remember this is only the third trial in the history of our country. I mean, Nixon didn't even want to go through the process, so he resigned before the House could even get going. So there are generations past that have really put high regard and a high definition around that word impeachment. And what I fear, as someone who loves the Constitution and analyzes this stuff and coaches leaders, is the bar has been lowered, and both sides are at fault for making it very political and not respecting the gravity of what impeachment is.
So let's put your coaching hat back on one more time with President Trump in this case. He has tweeted that it doesn't matter how many documents we turn over, it will never be enough for the Democrats. And now he's off busy doing a lot of press on his renegotiation of free trade. Is that the right move for him?
If he were my client, I'd say keep going. The optics are good for you. I was just watching a press conference about an hour ago that he conducted, and calling out by name, the head of Ford, the head of GM. Those are good optics for him. Those are the headlines. Those are the videos and the audio that will be playing for this week of Donald Trump sounding like a winner, looking like a winner. And those who love Donald Trump, that only ramps that up. And those who are on the fence have what they have with the Democrats. What are those optics right now? Fighting on the campaign trail or trying to possibly impeach the president. So the optics for Donald Trump are actually a lot better right now.
All right, Rashini, thanks for keeping an eye on things in Washington for us. We really appreciate it.
So much fun.
All right, that's our show for tonight. For News Now, I'm Kevin Dietz. Good evening.